Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So today is it's Christmas. It's Christmas Day, and I'm not sure where you are today, whether you're with family, friends, if you've traveled across the country to be with different people. Wherever you are, if you decide to watch this 2 days later after Christmas, um, welcome, right? Welcome and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. So today, just a reminder, we at Ethos, we spend a lot of time, a lot of energy prepping for these different, I want to call them sermons, talks, whatever you want to call them. We spend a lot of time on them. And what we do, we often will delve really deep into rabbinical studies, the actual words of that time, the audience. We spend a lot of time doing this. And so this is the last day of the giving year, right? And so please consider donating to our nonprofit here at Ethos. And we'll give you the slide there again later to show you where to donate. But ethos-church.org/donate. Again, consider partnering with us as we continue growing this ministry. So thank you for joining us today. So this is our last part in this series of the promise. And again, the promise, looking over the story of the birth narrative. It's such a beautiful one. And so again, when we take time to really delve into what it meant for that audience, what the words, the actual context, all of it meant, the story hums. It just pops. And so we're going to spend a little more time on this to close out this series. And then next week, we're going to delve into this idea of the new birth, the new story, the new narrative that we're about to walk into. And when I say that, I mean the 1st of January, right? This New Year's resolution idea. So next week, we'll delve into that. And then we'll hop right back into our Genesis study, which again has been over a year. It's been an awesome, awesome study. So let's move through the promise today. So a reminder, anyone joining us for the first time, the story of the birth of Jesus is very similar to Genesis. And this is what I mean by that. When they're writing Genesis, they were captives in Babylon. They just lost their temple, 587 BC. They were taken captive by the Babylonians, and they're put in the city with all these other tribes. And so the question, of course, that they're asking is, are we going to assimilate? Are we going to take on their gods, their traditions, their stories, or will we choose to be Jewish? Will we choose to hold on to our culture rather than take on theirs? And so they respond to that fear of assimilation by compiling all the stories, right? All the legends, the stories, the advice from the ages that have been passed down generationally. And so what you have with the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John narratives is you have to remember these are told 70 AD. Not 70 AD. These are told anywhere from 70 AD to 140 AD, right? See, these are compiled. Jesus, we know, probably would have been crucified somewhere around 27 to 31 AD. And so they're compiled, 40 years later. And so the question, of course, is why wait, right? Why wait to compile the stories, the narratives? Well, the answer, of course, is that the Jews, when they wrote their stories, they wrote them for a purpose. And so 70 AD, what happens? Well, the same thing that happened in 587 BC. The same thing that happened to them with the Greek Empire, right? Their temples destroyed, their people are murdered on the streets, and they're wondering, are we ever going to bounce back from this, right? Will we ever have our empire back, right? Will we ever be able to be free again? That's the question they're asking. And so when they ask that question, they begin to put together the stories of hope, the stories that tell them we're going to make it, right? And they often will center the stories around different messianic figures. And so Abraham, Moses, Joshua, right? Daniel, these individuals who they stand up against the empire, right? They hold firm to their beliefs. And in the end, right, in the end, you have these beautiful moments where Joseph becomes this powerful figure, and he leads his people through famine, through pain, through brokenness, while in captivity, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And so what these people do in 70 AD, they don't look to Moses now. They're not writing another Moses. They're not writing about Abraham again. They've already done that. Who do they center their narrative on now? They have a new messianic person, and this is Jesus. Right? This is Jesus. And Jesus says over and over again, I am the truth. I am the light, right? I am Torah. I am Torah. I am all of these figures into one. That's who Jesus is. And so 70 AD, they center now their hope on this new person of Jesus, right? Who's showing them the kingdom of heaven is not out there, it's right here. And so this is why it's such a powerful, powerful moment where these gospels come out, because it's giving these people hope. It's helping them move through the fears of assimilation. That's the reason that they write of Jesus. It's not to write a historical, accurate document, right? We know that because the gospels don't even agree on many, many details. That was never the point, right? The point was to offer hope in the middle of brokenness and pain. That's the idea. The question of what happens to our tribe now. This is what they'll move through. And so a reminder, with the birth story, only 2 of the Gospels actually focus on the birth story. And so we have Matthew, right? And Matthew's he's going to present the birth story in more of like, this is the birth of a king, right? This is the birth of a king who's going to lead our people like a David, right? And so there's going to be all these interesting connections to David, the Star of David, right? Bethlehem's where he's going to be born. All these different elements that would have connected deeply to David, the king. Whereas, of course, Luke is going to have more of the prophetic connection. Jesus was not a David. He was more of a Moses, right? And so Luke is going to make a lot of connections to Jesus, 40 days in the wilderness, whereas Moses, 40 years. All these interesting connections, Luke will try to kind of tease out and make connections too, because here's the thing. We remember the Jewish people at this moment, they're writing the stories and they're not looking forward. They're looking far back. And so they're making all these connections, these parallels. Jesus is like Joshua. Jesus is like Moses. Jesus is like Daniel. Jesus is like this and this and this. And they're going to use all of that to make deep connections to who Jesus is now. So as the scribes are writing, they're not looking forward. They have Jesus in mind, and they're looking back to make connections there. And again, we've seen this over and over again. Psalm 22, Jesus is on the cross, right? And he begins quoting Psalm 22. If Jesus is on the cross dying, is he literally going to be quoting verbatim scripture like chapters? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. You decide. But the point of it, the writers are trying to make another deep connection there. And so they'll write those pieces in. Literal or not the point. The point is Jesus is that Moses. Jesus is that Joshua. Jesus is the Abraham. Jesus is that figure who's going to lead us into the promised land now in 70 AD, in this new era. That's the deep idea. And so many people, when they read the birth story, they'll miss the historical stuff that's going on then. So I wanted to share with you some interesting points to consider, because I've read so much history of that first century. What's going on for the Jewish people? And so there was actually a king at that time, a king, right, who felt he was the next David. He was a Jewish individual who had a good amount of power. They called him a puppet king, right? Rome put this Jewish man of royalty in power. And this individual oftentimes considered himself the Messiah, the one that had come to lead their people into a new era, right? Into a new promised land. And so this individual's name was Herod. Herod was an actual person born during this time. And so watch some of the interesting connections here. Herod, the idea, Herod spread this rumor all throughout the land that he was born of a virgin. Now, many people will have this discussion. Why a virgin, right? What most people don't understand about first century era, if you are a Jew or a Roman, is that the Romans, they had this idea that the gods would come down and they would mate, right, with people, right, with common day people. And what would happen is from that birth, you would have a demigod, right, a god that was both man and God. And so that would only happen through the virgin birth, right, because there was no person who impregnated her. It was from the gods. And so this idea was very, very common. Every emperor had a virgin birth. Very, very common idea. And so it's interesting. Herod adopts this idea too. He spreads the idea around that, yes, I am actually a demigod. Right? That's how he saw himself. He was a demigod. There are countless pieces written about Herod and how egotistical he was. He was also born in Bethlehem. Interesting connection. Yeah. He was born of a kingly lineage. You can actually follow Herod's lineage and see Herod all throughout that era. He had been born of Jewish royalty. And also, interestingly enough, what most people don't know about Herod is when Herod is born, it was very common for royalty to be visited by outsiders. And so he was visited by outsiders and they gave him gifts. Foreigners. And so look at all the interesting connections, right? Jesus. Jesus does the very same thing. We have all these interesting connections of the birth story with Jesus. So what I find again interesting though is Herod said, I have set up this kingdom, this new reality, right? He built a temple that looked just like David's temple. Again, is this guy trying to overcompensate? Absolutely, right? All of his time, all of his energy was spent on sending out this message. I am the king. I have ushered in a new reality, a new kingdom. And so what I love about Jesus has the same message. I have come to offer a new reality. The message of Jesus was not that, hey, I'm going to go up there, I'm going to come back down, I'm going to come save you, I'm going to do this and that. No, the message of Jesus over and over again, if you read deeply, you'll see it. The message Jesus shared over and over and over again was about the kingdom, right? Yes, he gives this idea of God is love and God is good, and I'm reshaping your idea of what the character of God looks like. Absolutely, that message is there. But the most common, dominant theme of Jesus that he shares over and over again is the kingdom come reality. He says, I have come to show you over and over again what this kingdom looks like. And he says, the kingdom is here, it's among us. It's right here, right? And so John 18:36 says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. It's a different place entirely. Herod's kingdom, it looks very Roman, doesn't it? Herod's story, very Roman. Herod wants his kingdom, the Jewish nation, to follow the pattern of beastly empire. Jesus says, no, no, no. That's not my kingdom. That's not your kingdom. My kingdom, our kingdom, this present reality, this promised land we have been searching for, looks very different. In fact, the word for world here in the Greek, it doesn't mean the earth, right? A new earth, a literal earth, a new world. It means the way things are ordered. So look back at this here. My ordering of life is not of this place we're in. It's not of this order. My kingdom is not ordered the same way Herod's kingdom is. Right? And this is why the birth story looks very interesting too. The way I want to order the world is going to look and feel very different than Herod's. So again, Jesus not literally looking to replace the literal earth, something way deeper. It's so beautiful. The old way of empire, consuming destroying, marginalizing, taking captive. That order is done away with, Jesus says. We can do away with that, and we can order it differently. The new birth of this kingdom, he says, is about to unfold. And I'm going to share it now with you. That's what he says. But here's the thing. With any new movement, with any new kingdom come reality, there are birth pains. And so some of you are getting it right now. The story of Jesus for Matthew and Luke, it could only start here. It could only start with the birth story, because any movement, any change, any growth, any new kingdom come reality is going to come at a cost. And so it's going to come with birth pains. There are going to be painful things that take place. They're going to happen with any birth. And so in comes Mary, right? Enter Mary. Mary's going to be the one that goes through the birth pains. She is going to be the reminder of Israel, right? We had Father Israel with Abraham. Now we have Mother Israel, right, with Mary. It's a beautiful picture. Rather than using the patriarchal system again, these first century Roman Jewish individuals, they choose to center the story now on a woman. Really pretty beautiful. She is the mother of the nation, right, of this new movement. She's going to give birth. She's going to go through birth pains. And this is why, again, when you look at Matthew and Luke, these two different lineages, you're going to see it has a lot of interesting, there's royalty connected with it. Joseph is going to be all throughout this lineage too. It's going to come from David, right? They have deep roots. And these deep roots are reminders of this is the walk that Moses took, the walk that Joseph took. It's the walk that Daniel took. It's the walk that David took. This is not new, right? This is not a new thing, but it's a new birth at this moment in this era. And the new person we look to is now Jesus. And Mary is about to give birth to this new movement. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be easy. Now, the figure of Mary is really an interesting one, right? People will often say, well, how much of it is real? How much of it is literal? How much of it is symbolic? Well, if you look into the story of Mary, and then you historically look at Mary, there's some interesting things that come up. And so I'll just share those right now. You do with it what you will. But if you're a Jewish person, there's something deeper I'm going to show you in a minute that you would have connected with immediately. The question of was she real or not would not even have come into your mind. There was something deeper. But notice this, there's no historical record of Mary as the mother of Jesus. Given her residence in a hamlet in Judea's farming region, she was not likely from a wealthy or influential urban family with the means to record their ancestry. So many people have written about this. They've tried to find Mary historically. And if you're trying to do that, you're not going to succeed. At least right now, no one has. They have not found an actual literal Mary. But what they found, if you read it, the story, Matthew and Luke, from the lens of a Jewish person, you immediately make the connection that us, 2021, would not have made. And here it is. You would have thought of Miriam. When the writers were writing of Jesus, they were looking back. They thought of Miriam. Miriam, the word Miriam in the Hebrew, is the word in the Greek Mary. Come on now, right? Wow! That's interesting, right? Mary, if you were to say the word Mary, the name Mary, in the Hebrew, you would say Miriam. Miriam is Mary. If you're reading this, you're reading Miriam, right? Because very few are actually reading Greek at this moment. They're still thinking with Hebraic thought. So when they hear of Mary, they are picturing Miriam from the Moses story. Again, the one that sends little baby Moses down the river, the one that takes care of Moses, that goes through the pain and the brokenness and helps build up Moses' life as he's stuck in this empire in Egypt, right? He's captive in Egypt, and yet he's going to take his people into a new kind of reality. And Miriam is that central figure that oftentimes we see connected to Moses. Yeah. So look at these deep connections here. You'll see Mary and Miriam. If you look deep at this, Luke 1, Exodus 15, you'll see there are so many interesting connections, right? Even the actual verbiage of different verses. I would just take a moment, pause the screen, look at these connections. It's almost shocking to some of us who have never seen these connections. Just pause it. Look at the screen, look at these connections here. Obviously, the writers of that time, those scribes, they are looking back. They're writing Miriam, into the story, aren't they? It's very, very cool. They're trying to show a deep connection here. And so the idea, again, over and over again, Jesus is the new reality. Miriam, is the one that's going to give birth to this new nation, this new way of ordering the world. But it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, right? The journey is going to be tough. And this is why so many of the main patriarchs, the messianic figures, their names, the names themselves mean to wrestle, the one that overcomes, Yeshua, right? Overcomes, the anointed one. All of these names, all these connections are going to remind us over and over again. We follow in the footsteps of the ones who have overcome, who have gone through the birth pains, and we should expect to have to do the same. But when we do, when we move through it, something beautiful is right there at our grasp, right? 1 Corinthians 15, where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Right? Even in death, when it seems like everything's fallen apart for these first century people who've lost their temple, watched as the Romans came in, and anyone that didn't flee to the hills was murdered, right? Where, O death, is your sting? Right? Where's your victory? Because you know what? We will not quit. We're not going to let our nation die at your hands. We will overcome, right? The new birth is just around the corner. That's the story. And so if you have ever experienced a birth, you know what it looks like, right? Many of us have had kids. We've seen it, right? You're holding hands with your wife and she's screaming out. It's painful. There's blood. It's a messy experience, right? I had no idea how messy it was until we had our firstborn. I was like, whoa, this is not what the movies look like, right? This is messy. But that's the beauty of birth. It's chaotic. It's bloody. It sometimes ends in like these crazy moments, but then at the ends, it ends with this beautiful new birth of this new baby who you're holding in your arms. And you realize all that 9 months of uncomfortableness, right? You're bloating, you're having to pee every 2 minutes. All of that, it was worth it because now you're holding that baby in your arms. And what a beautiful, symbolic, beautiful metaphor for Israel. We've gone through the 9.5 months, right? We've gone through the birth pains. We've done it all. And soon we're going to hold baby in our arms, and it will all have been worth it. One of my favorite quotes of all time, especially connected to the birth narrative, is this one here by Shannon Casey. She says, "In the darkness of the womb, the future is waiting to be reborn. And yes, sometimes we feel terrible, but this Advent may have ears to hear the midwife as she compassionately reminds us to breathe." We had an incredible midwife who worked with us through the birth, and we got to do this water birth for Brooklyn. It was so good. But our midwife, Lisa Marie, she was standing there with us. She was reminding Danielle, breathe, try this, do this, right? We're going to make it. We're going to make it through. You're going to do this. Baby's almost here. She was that voice for us. And what a needed voice in the middle of all the chaos. And here's what the birth story was. The birth story was that reminder to breathe. The birth story is the reminder that you're going to make it, right? The new birth, you're going to hold the baby soon, right? You're going to have your nation back soon. Breathe, Israel. You're going to make it. Things are going to change. They're going to shift. Hope is just around the corner. Hold on. The new birth, the new reality is about to take place. So good. The new birth reality is about to take place wherever you are in your journey. The new birth reality, yes, it's painful. It's not easy. Whatever you're going through, remember you're going to get through it. I have a student that told me this week, in the middle of the holidays, they were just kicked out of their apartment. He said this Christmas has felt awful for them. They have nowhere to go. They've been staying in a van. But he said to me yesterday, Mr. Werfel, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. We are going to make it. And someday I know we're going to have an apartment again. We're going to have a home again. When I heard him say that, I thought of this birth narrative again. In the middle of the pain, in the middle of these nights where you're sleeping in a van, trying to stay warm, there's always hope. There's always hope that the new birth, the new reality, the new life is just around the corner. That's what Christmas is really all about, isn't it? So beautiful. So today, I wondered, how do we take it home? What do we do with this story, this twist on the story, right? Which is really, I would argue, the primary reason of the story, if you were Jewish reading this Jewish piece. So I thought, how do we navigate painful births? How do we navigate these moments where we're going through something difficult, knowing that the new thing is just around the corner? We have to get through it, but we move through the pain. How do we navigate painful births? Here's the first idea that I thought of. Number one, acknowledge that things are changing. Acknowledge that it's not easy, right? Sometimes we get so caught up in fighting change that we actually put off actually dealing with it. And so sometimes denial is a really powerful force, and it protects us in many ways. However, stepping outside of it, saying to yourself, things are changing, and it's okay. When we can get to that place sometimes, I would argue that sets us up for some really beautiful successes later on. Just acknowledging it first. Number two, seek support. You cannot get through life alone. I know many people think they can. I don't need friends. I don't need community. The truth is you do. We are hardwired for community, for connection, right? And so it's okay to ask for help sometimes. That's a sign that you know yourself well enough to realize that you need some assistance sometimes. So seek support. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Number three, write down the positives that have come from this change. I don't always do this, and so I forget sometimes. But when you can stop and say, hey, there's actually some really good things that are going to come from this, right? Take a moment, write them down. You might just be surprised at the kind of shifts and positive things that will come from this moment of rebirth. Even though it's painful, even though it's hard, write some of those down. It's a visual reminder of how beautiful change can be, even in the middle of the brokenness. Number five, get proactive. I like this one a lot. Being proactive means you're taking charge and you're working preventatively. So this means you figure out what steps you need to take. Instead of being reactive, you're being proactive, right? You're actually saying, these are the things I need to do in order to make this a reality, to make this a positive shift in my life. So think to yourself, I'm no longer reactive. I'm not just going to continue reacting to everything in my life. I'm going to be proactive. And then lastly, give yourself a break. Again, something I am not good at yet. Working on it. But in a time of change, you may feel like you're out of control. And I know for me, that's happened many times in my life. And so you may feel like you're not living up to your expectations for yourself. But remember, you are allowed to do less than what is humanly possible, right? We put ourselves on these crazy high pedestals. The reality is you were not made to work 100% of the time. right? 1,000%. That's not realistic. People make mistakes. It's one of the great things about being human. So it's learning from the mistakes that really, really matters, right? Give yourself a break. Be graceful to yourself in the middle of all of this. You're going to make mistakes. And when you do, acknowledge it, learn from it, move on, right? We can even at some point begin laughing at those mistakes. It's beautiful. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this last Christmas message. It's so much fun to re-examine this in new ways, right? So good. As always, please consider donating. ethos-church.org/donate. Again, it's the last day for this year's at least giving. And so please consider donating. Help us continue growing this ministry. We think it's so important, so valuable. We want to continue growing the YouTube channel. We want to continue growing other areas that we've seen success in. Consider going to our online meeting where we discuss a lot of this openly in an open forum with really great people. And as always, hit that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button, share these stories, share these messages with people. We think they're worth people's time. Everyone, we love you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next year, next year, as we talk about the new reality, how to navigate the new shifts, the new changes, how to navigate a new year coming up, right? We'll talk about that too. Everyone, take care. We'll see you next week.